Today I'm joined once again by the one and only Auron MacIntyre. Auron, I've known him since he was a wee little account on Twitter and relatively small as well. I think on YouTube where he started as an anonymous video essayist, and now he has reached the ultimate status as a the shaper thoughts, pretty much relatively mainstream, I think, at least on the right. So, welcome back, Oran.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, no, it's been weird, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a roller coaster, a journey of incredible evolution, and it's been awesome to watch because I've said this before, but you are probably the most narratively gifted person on this side of the fence, and you've been able to take some pretty complex and obscure and definitely unpalatable ideas, wrap them up in meme magic, and send them out into the wild. And they have caught on. I mean, I think there's been quite a lot of echoes from relatively the mainstream about things that you mention in your work, things that you chat about on Twitter. I mean, your Twitter's taken off massively. Yeah, I mean, it's been how long has it been? Maybe a year and a half since you've had this mega growth?
Yeah, I started the channel about 2.5 years ago, I think. But yeah, about a year and a half ago, things really started to pick up, and I did that appearance on Timcast, and I think that kind of snowballed everything. And so it has been very wild to see everything kind of go the way it has. But yeah, it's always surreal when someone like posts memes that I made back like 2 years ago back onto my own comments and stuff, and I just
Mhm.
like I completely forgot that I made those, and they're back there. It's like, oh yeah, okay,
Yeah, the civil rights Pokemon
yeah, I completely forgot
thing.
that I made that one. Yeah,
I didn't know you
yeah,
made that one.
yeah.
I do refer to it myself if in case need be. So yeah, I mean, it's great. That one and the James Lindsay's 8,000 point plan to destroy the
Well,
civil rights meme. That's
yeah,
a
that
bug
one is
beef.
Bog Beefs. Yeah, that
Yeah,
that one's not
good
mine.
one
I
as
can't
well.
claim credit to that one, but that's an excellent one. It's a beautiful piece of work.
Exactly. I mean, there is something to this stuff. I mean, there is a certain power, a certain magic to it. And a lot of people on this side try to be like the top theory cell, never repetitive, and that's not really how ideas actually get disseminated. You kind of want to hammer an idea home because I mean, there's a limited set. There's obviously many authors, and they all kind of have their spin on this core set of principles that people have been uncovering here on the so-called Dissident Right and NRX. But you could probably boil it down to a 10-point plan, which is complicated enough, but it needs to reach the right audience. And I think your approach has been by far the most successful to do that. I mean, there are other angles on this. Obviously, there's the BAP angle, which is a different, also kind of a different philosophy as well, I think. Similar, but rhymes, but is not always the same. But yeah, I mean, very few people have been so successful with it. So I wonder what what have you learned on your successful journey from the bottom to the top, and I also wonder what you've learned about the dynamics within this movement because things have changed like in the last 2 years, definitely in terms of obviously how popular these ideas have become in part thanks to you, but also how I don't know how the ideas themselves have changed. And I wonder if you could kind of reflect on that, especially through the incentives that the platforms that they're shared on, because this is something I've been thinking about quite a lot. Like, how does the medium influence how these ideas evolve? Who participates in this? Like, kind of what have you noticed? What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge thing. And it really does. The platform, of course, shapes things wildly. I think that's always difficult for some people to grasp that there has to be different levels to what you're doing, right? You can come in there, and I think that complexity is really important. I think that you need complexity, that you need people who understand the theory, that there are people who are talking at that very high level and working through those ideas, and there's you should not decry that. I think that's essential, but at the same time I think it's important to understand that at some point you have to have these things be influential, right? And even if you're not carrying that entire message, that entire level of complexity, you need some kind of lower resolution version of that that's kind of palatable and digestible for certain parts of the mainstream. And so I think an aristocrat knows how to talk to the people and to the king, right? And I think that people have to be ready to kind of work at different levels with that kind of stuff. And especially this is true with social media because, as many people have noticed, like, your dumbest tweet will be the one that goes the widest. It will be the lowest effort post you make, the one meme you snap off in a meme generator with everything cut off. That is the thing that blows up. It's your I've had complex theory threads go wide, but that happened way after people shared pictures with words on top of them. It's not the other way around. And so it's just being able to mix up your messaging and understand what works, especially on Twitter, where Twitter is not a platform for intense debate or complex discussion. That's not what grows things on Twitter. I mean, if you want to use it that way, that's fine, but just don't expect things to go wide when you do them that way. For the same reason that you wouldn't expect like a well-performed opera to do well on ABC primetime, television. Like those are just two very different mediums with two very different things that perform well in them. And you just need, I think it's important to not dismiss complexity, but also not dismiss those who are speaking to the mainstream with a message that is similar, but it has to be, again, kind of low resolution for those who are going to be consuming it.
There's a common critique that shows up for pretty much anyone who achieves any sort of level of popularity in the space is that this one of the core ideas in the space is that this is for elites. It's very exclusive. You don't want to be diluting your message and not gatekeeping enough. And this is not for the plebs. Obviously, this is for the aristocrats. And I wonder, I think there's some validity to this. Obviously, you can dilute the message, endlessly and just, turn it into, ridiculous sound bites. And I think the internet and these platforms do tend to kind of try to draw you in that direction through audience capture, through the fact that, if you have an audience now that's, let's say, one or two standard deviations above the norm, which it usually takes to digest all this theory cell type stuff, when you boil it down to simpler and simpler sound bites and ideas, you'll obviously reach a larger audience just by the fact that they're a very large proportion of the population. By the way, I think that's what happened to the Manosphere as well. I think we've had like waves and waves of like sub midwits sloshing into the space, and it's really corrupted all of it. But anyway, maybe get to that later. But yeah, I think it's there's probably a balance to be struck, and I think you're probably in a good space to find that balance because I don't think you've simplified your message in the sense of like, okay, you've taken out the spicy bits. I think the spicy bits are pretty much still in there. You've just kind of been very good um, at creating a narrative around all of this and kind of even presenting it in a structured way. So I don't know. That's just my kind of my observation on your work up until this point.
Yeah, I'm just not big on transgression for transgression's sake. And if the truth is difficult, or if a concept is difficult for people to accept at a moment, that's fine as long as it's true. But I don't find any particular value in just being the guy who's pushing the envelope. And so if I'm not pushing the envelope enough for some people, that's fine. Like that doesn't bother me. I'm not your guy. That's okay. But I just think that there are difficult things that we have to have a conversation about, that people have to become aware of, that the average person needs to acknowledge. But at the same time, I think you need to understand that most people knew these things, like deep down somewhere. Like it's out of the corner of their eye. It's a piece of their lizard brain. It's something that they don't talk about at a party, or they'd never admit at work because it might get them fired. But it's something that they know. And if you frame these things in a way that just acknowledges the truth of them and the obviousness of them, and I think most importantly, their relationship to to a good understanding and a healthy society, then I think you can move a lot more people on this than some understand. If you're just diving in there and immediately saying, I just want to be edgy and I'm going to take the hardest line on this and I'm going to be as harsh and aggressive on this, well, you can do that, and you might be saying some true things in the meantime. But if you just explain to people that a lot of this stuff is common sense that your grandparents knew, and they would have told you if you just asked them about it, and didn't and everyone didn't yell at them when they mentioned the obvious thing, then I think it's a lot easier to kind of say some of those truths. And so I think that really it's an approach that can change the acceptability of a message. It might be more or less the same on certain levels, but simply addressing it as something that is for the benefit of the people you're talking to, is common sense, is traditional knowledge, is something that I think is very persuasive, as opposed to just coming in and dive bombing people with the edgiest presentation you can.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, while talking about aristocrats and elites and counter elites and all this stuff, ignore the fact that these elites still do need to have a certain client class with a coherent vision of themselves represented in the people. It doesn't all happen in, in the ethereal ivory tower within, battles between these people. The real world still matters, and the identity of the group opposing the consensus, and that essentially a counter elite would have to represent, because whose elite would they be, is still essential. And I think that's where this, putting in the elbow grease to actually propagate these memes and making this stuff more available to people. I think that's where it becomes really important.
Yeah, I think it's really easy, and this is still a debate that happens all the time. I still disagree with some of my friends on this, but whether or not everything is completely just a top down power move, completely ideological and stripped of any morality or any kind of interaction, or whether there is more of a somewhat conversational or feedback loop that enters into your political formula. And I think it's important for people to understand that while I'm 100% on board with the idea, I'm not a populist. I do think that elites matter and elites drive opinion, and their leadership is what shapes culture. I think that that has to have some kind of organic reflection in the group that they're attempting to represent. And if it doesn't, you can make it work for a while. You can just go on raw power, but you're certainly not going to garner the kind of support that people are looking for to really change, I think, a system like we're looking at now. So I am one of the people who's a little more on the there is somewhat of a dialogue between the patron and the client, rather than just the patron completely constructs the identity and the morality and the reality of everyone who is a client, and therefore they drive every single bit of this situation.
There's, I think, through the construction of the reality of the client. I mean, that has to be, even if it's one way, it involves both parties.
Mm.
People are looking up to these elites, and they would have to have, the mimetic power to become the elites for this constituency. They don't own them in any other way. So it's always a two-way street, even if one party is influencing the other. The influence travels between them. So yeah, I think you can't really, you can't just have a detached elite, completely detached, which, like you said, doesn't necessarily mean populism. I guess it doesn't mean populism in any way, but it means that the power to influence these people is important, and it is based in the quality of the memes in the end, and how representative these memes and these arguments are for the people down there. I mean, this is all starting extreme presumption. We are talking about elites and aristocrats and people like this, which unfortunately, or I don't know, fortunately, are inevitable in the course of a human existence. So yeah, I think that's, yeah, unfortunately, a given in our situation.
Yeah, there's really no escaping it, and I think everybody kind of in this sphere that we've kind of made contact with understands that, or are pretty close to understanding that. That's pretty well understood for most people. The only question, like you said, is kind of how how much gatekeeping you need to do, or how much, and there should be plenty of gatekeeping when it comes to leadership, but I do think that there has to be, some crossover. There has to be some understanding with the general populace of the kind of ideas you're talking about, the kind of changes you're trying to bring. You have to be able to find a way to communicate the benefits of this to the people who you're trying to influence. And that doesn't mean you need to bring down every single piece of theory from on high, but it does mean you need to put in the practice. Like that's the thing. It's like this is a skill and you got to build it. Like we need an army of people who have this skill, because guess what, the other side does for sure. Like, the old joke is the left can't meme, which is why everyone is converting to transgenderism, right? Like they can meme, they meme just fine. And so you really do need to have a group of people, especially in kind of our increasingly digital age, where whether we like it or not, like the mind control device is going to be the thing. Like people are going to be influenced by cathedral like apparatus no matter what. And so you've got to get good at this. You need to be able to kind of bring that message to the masses, even if that isn't like overall your view that the masses are the ones that drive ideology. You still need to understand your ability to translate portions of this and explain again, and most importantly, its benefits. Like how are the things you're doing going to improve the lives of those who you're delivering that message to? That's really going to matter, and it's a skill you got to perfect.
And an important argument you made before is the fact that, our grandparents knew about this, and they knew about this because it was self-evident in the reality around them and how they interacted with each other and nature. And, they're obviously much more grounded in survival. Maybe not, I guess in whatever, like 1950s America, they were a bit more like chill, but let's say maybe great grandparents, they knew what they needed to do to pass on their heritage, to pass on their language, their customs, and all of this. And they thought it was useful because they knew it was useful because it was self evident from everything around them. They knew that there were differences between groups of people. They knew that there were differences between men and women. This all this stuff was undeniable just because it had practical value. Nowadays, I think the left has been able to meme so successfully because a lot of these ideas are kind of like, they don't really, or they're not that relevant in the day to day existence of people. They've kind of just been, a lot of it has been outsourced to the market or the state. All the problems that we needed to solve by cooperating with each other and acknowledging these realities. And now we're just kind of maybe in a situation where a lot of these realities might return just because when you drift so far from base reality, things start to break, and a lot of things are starting to break in terms of, I mean, infrastructure, just the distance of current elites from base reality, the way they implement policy, the ideas that they have. Like just something like energy policy in Germany. This is absolute madness. It is going to drive that country into the ground. It is based on false science. I mean, essentially, their policy is pretty much to, decommission their nuclear plants now. Especially, there's literally still a war with Russia, who's their main energy supplier. They're repowering all their coal plants, but they're still running most suicidal renewables policy in the world, and now they've ramped it up. So this could not happen to a population that was still plugged into any sort of sense of reality and history. But they're doing it, and they're not the only ones. They're just kind of, obviously having lost World War II, they're the at the helm of whatever insanity is coming from the left. So yeah, I mean, I'm not itching for doomerism here. I'm not expecting some sort of collapse or anything. But I think when things are starting to deteriorate and people will have to maybe rely on each other, rely on their neighbors, maybe organize locally just to solve problems because the states are slowly failing in many parts. You have anarchy in South Africa, anarcho tyranny in the US. You've got pretty much a flavor of that in the UK as well. Western Europe, similarly. Romania is pretty much still in the balance because we had like absolutely apocalyptic type governance. Now we're kind of getting better, but who knows what else the European Union is going to want from us. So, yeah, I mean, do you see that as a kind of a doomer optimist perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, G.K. Chesterton said that every high civilization dies by forgetting kind of simple truths. And for some people, that's difficult. Some people are like, "Man, I can't believe that all this has happened before. All of this is obvious, and it's going to happen again." But for me, it's kind of I take a different tack on this. I think that we all have a role to play. We are all somewhere in our civilizational cycle. And of course, everyone would like to be in the heroic phases or the great phases of luxury and building and glory. But that's not where you are, and there's nothing you can do about that particular part of that. And so the truth is that a good quarter of human civilization or people or a good quarter of humans who have ever been born have been born into this type of scenario. And so you're just going to be one of those people. And you're in the part of, civilization where people just forget important truths. They just forget really powerful things that have been obvious because they've built enough civilizational infrastructure between them and reality that they can ignore it for a while. And of course, this is a game that you always lose. You can never outrun reality forever. You'll eventually cash that check. You'll eventually pay that price. But you can do it for a long time. And the West is fabulously wealthy. And so they can do it for much longer than probably any other civilization has. But eventually it'll just kind of happen. I mean, the bad news is that things might fall apart. The good news is if bad things fall apart, you get the opportunity for good things to be born. And so I think that's really the key to stay focused on is we're in the time of building, we're in the time of preservation, we're in the time there will be chances to be heroic, there will be chances to make important decisions and be an important force in the world. It won't be that you swoop in and stop probably Western civilization from heading the direction it's heading now. I'm really not sure that that's an option, but it does mean that you can prepare the ground for the next thing. You can be the generation that prepares, that plants those trees so that the next generation can sit under them. And so I think it's one of those things that, yeah, in some ways it's difficult to watch parts of this tear itself apart. But at the same time, we're also the civilization where, they're mutilating children to fulfill some kind of, demonic religious rituals. So maybe it's not the worst thing that we lose some of the technology to continue that type of behavior or the capacity to continue that behavior. Maybe it's not the worst thing that we can look forward to, the creation of something that is newer or better.
Yeah, I mean that's the hopeful angle on this. I think my kind of my worry and in a way my hope as well is that there are enough people of the caliber to actually go down this route. It's like the idea that you can have a virtuous system based on a virtuous populace, but I feel like all of the incentives for virtue kind of have been yeah, outcompeted by technology. Like virtue is really a muscle that hasn't been practiced in decades. Like there's entire generations that have had very little opportunity to even contemplate what a virtuous life might mean because they had no need. I mean, virtue itself served a certain purpose in previous generations, and now it's just like it's a meme, a hard meme. So yeah, I wonder what exactly is going to happen. I mean, this is also part of the civilizational cycle, the weak men part, unfortunately. And they bring troubled times. I do hope that they're not as advertised.
Yeah, but the next part of the cycle is the hard times make strong men, and I think that's what we're seeing is we're going to be in a situation where humanity is going to be selecting for something different. Humanity was selecting for surplus, the creation of surplus, the ability to mass produce and mass consume and generate. And we're getting to the end of surplus having value. We're getting to the end of massification having value. We're getting to the end of the point to where accumulation is the goal. And instead, I think we're going to start selecting for the ability to deny oneself access to certain things, the ability to deny oneself, ease of dependence on the state or on certain technologies or those kind of things. And so I think these times are ironically going to be materially abundant, but spiritually hard. And material abundance now is waning, as we've started to see as well. And so that's really again going to select for those who are able to eschew kind of all the methadone that's going to be offered to them, all the things that can kind of ease the passing of civilization, and are willing to look for kind of new pathways and build new things when no one else wants to do it and no one else thinks it's possible. And so again, you can be black pilled on it. You can say, I can't believe that this old thing is passing away, but really should it have continued forever? Is this really what you want your grandkids to inherit? Or do you want to go through this time of trial so that something new and beautiful is there for them when the time comes?
Yeah, I think I'm both kind of black and white pilled on this, and in the long run, obviously, I'm white pilled. I can see all these trends kind of sorting themselves out. I'm just I'm a mom, so I'm thinking about my son's exact life. I wish, in a way, I kind of wish him abundance because that's kind of what I've known, and in a very like obviously we've had tough times as well sometimes, but this is comparative to my grandparents. This is just absurd abundance and absurd freedom in many ways, like the fact that I can, start an internet-based radio show thing is pretty nuts. And I kind of would like him to have access to that. But at the same time, I know that, who knows what might happen in the next, 20, 30 years. And just looking at, the mentality and the trajectory that politics and the global economy seems to take, and the absolute lack of accountability on every level, the impossibility of accountability in the managerial state. It's just, I don't know. That's kind of the bleaker part. That's more of a dark red pill. I think that direction. But yeah, overall, I think if my son manages to reproduce and his children as well, I think by then things would will have sorted themselves out.
Yeah, and like I said, it's of course it's obviously very easy for us to sit on the internet with nice equipment, and computers and technology, and talk about hard times, right? Like there are real hard times. And no one wishes that on themselves, or especially hopefully on their children. But again, you kind of have to ask yourself, like, how long are we going to do peace in our time? Like how long are we going to do that embrace of that which has obviously in many ways destroyed us. Of course, I don't think that any of this is completely going away. I don't think we're going to a dark age. We will continue to have technology. We will continue to be connected in very different ways. We will still have a digital era. And so much of this is not that, all of these quote unquote luxuries are going away, but it's going to be how we adjust and how those who overcome kind of our current malaise, like how they adjust and again deny themselves certain aspects of this, how they learn to adapt to this technology, adapt to this world, overcome its challenges, and build something that still reaches to kind of the good and true, beautiful and true, without pretending that you're just going to go full Luddite there. Like, sorry, I don't really think the Butlerian jihad is coming. I don't
Yeah.
really think we're going to smash every bit of this. Ted probably is wrong about some of that, and so I think that it's really going to be those that adapt and overcome with this. So I don't think your child or grandchildren will be without technology or some of these things. I think it's far more important that the spiritual and social technology advances for them than necessarily the digital technology.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and yeah, I think there are two directions this takes. I mean, you can take a completely kind of genetic population based approach and look at okay, who's more likely to reproduce, and it looks like a lot of our brethren have opted out because mostly because of memes. I mean, people who had their grandparents had five or six children, their parents had two. Now they have a cactus named Fifi on the windowsill, and that's about it, and that's going to be it. So yeah, I think that's in a way the spiritual war that someone like you is fighting. Not to fluff you up too much, but it's like it's the fact that this is a war of memes. Like you can win people from that side. I know you can because I used to be on that side, and it wouldn't have crossed my mind to have children because I thought why bring them into this world of misery. But then I kind of came to my senses, exposing myself to different ideas. Your show wasn't on the air back then, but I had, I don't know, read some books. Um, and it does work. And you can conquer people from the enemy's religion slowly, probably not extremely efficiently, but still it happens. And I think it's worth it because a lot of people say, oh, okay, yeah, these people just breed themselves out. These people are literally infected with a disease, a mental problem that has been incepted into them by the fact that the media apparatus in general now is extremely efficient to seeding these ideas. It's everywhere. It's since you're born. It's like from Disney movies to Netflix, it's all in there. They're always kind of just like telling you that, the purpose of life is to self-create. And the idea is that, at one point you hopefully realize that that's not the case. And then, all of this stuff that people like you are producing is there to kind of, embrace them and say, okay, this is the alternative. And I think it's extremely valuable for that as well. I mean, it's almost like every soul you save makes the whole journey worth it.
Yeah, you're one of those dark elves that got converted that Curtis is always on about. But yeah, I think it's a very weird thing because again, it's really important for people that certain parts of this be an extremely intellectual thing. And I think it's again, like I'm not decrying any of that. I spend like a ton of time explaining political theory. So obviously I'm not like, don't read old books. That's terrible. But it's also, people will think, okay, well, we don't need any kind of broad outreach. None of that's going to matter. And then, you play a strain of a song from a McDonald's commercial and they automatically salivate. It's like, obviously, this stuff works and it works even on the smartest people in the world. Why am I posting the same meme 1,000 times? Because that's how people remember it. It's really simple. It's not really complicated technology. It's the same reason that Coca-Cola keeps advertising to you, even though they're the most popular brand in the world and probably don't ever need to advertise to you again. And the cathedral understands this. Your ideological opponents understand this. And this is why it's always amazing when I see people talk about, oh, you got to have the most popular ideas. Like, how popular was child transition 2 years ago? And now it's something that everyone on the left is defending like it's the very last hill. They're literally marching into U.S. State houses after kids have been shot by a transgenderist school shooter and worshiping this ideology on the floor of these legislative bodies, an ideology they denied existed 5 years ago, saying no children ever get transition. That never happens. And now they're literally saying we can't ban it because it's a genocide of some kind, right? Like this is what the left is very good at. And whether you like it or not, you're going to have to fight the mimetic war. You're going to have to compete on this level. And so you got to step up your game. You got to be ready for this. You have to be able to communicate this because like you said, there are not only for power's sake, but also these are individual people who are making these decisions. These are families, these are children, these are moms, these are dads. Like there's a real human cost to leaving these people to the ideological ravages and propaganda of the state. Like you can't do it. Like, and so that means you have to have the game. And again, it needs to be intellectual on one level, but also needs, you need to be able to do the propaganda. You got to be able to do it. You can sniff at it all you want, but the masses are going to consume something. And so, makes sense to make sure you have the ability to shift opinion and shift understanding in that way.
Yeah, I think that the intellectual level is really important here. Just because I guess that's where a lot of kind of status is tied in, and I think the status is the lever that I see is so important on the internet, and you can see this even in the shift of ideologies. Like a lot of them, after a while, just kind of get a bit of an ick. Like if you look at like the alt right version one, um, it was low status. It's low brow. A lot of people involved in it I mean, I'm not going to name names, but they were kind of either like populist figures, people who kind of a little bit went a little bit unhinged, because that's kind of what the internet does to you. You kind of you either moderate and go mainstream, or you kind of have to really push it, and then you go a little bit nuts. It really became, it had some cachet. I was interested in it myself for a while, but then something happened. It might have also been, the fact that, alt right, it used to mean something completely different, and then it was kind of essentially became like, Richard Spencer specific, and it kind of got torn down by the liberal media, because they got the scent for it, and they started to do narrative warfare against it. But it also, like, the characters associated with it, just, they were low status. That's it. No one who had any sort of intellectual interest or something wanted to be associated with these guys. And not to say that, some, weren't interesting. I mean, some of Richard Spencer's, like, earlier work, his first album was pretty good.
His
But then
avant-garde is
exactly, some of his Radix Journal articles, not going to name which ones, but you can look them up, were quite interesting and good. But yeah, he just became, people got the ick, the so-called ick. And I think avoiding the ick, and building a cohort of, open-minded, intellectual, honest people, because this is the side of reality. This is, the core argument that we have, is that, this is the real stuff. And it's not just real because some paper said it. It's real because when you go out on the street, your lying eyes confirm it every day. So it's an easy sell for anyone who wants to be sold this. So I think, yeah, I think this is, maintaining status is a very important thing. And I think that's kind of where the gatekeeping comes in, because, like I mentioned before, I think that's kind of what didn't happen in the Manosphere, because it was like, in the days of, like, Heartiste and things like that, it was like probably one of the most interesting places that you can find even political conversations, in the days of the forum. Then it got moved onto the internet. It was still interesting. Like, a lot of the dissident right still kind of has a lot to do with that. But now it's kind of become a mainstream movement, and it's got, a lot of more, I don't know, more kind of memeified, bullet pointified type things. And yeah, it feels like it's gotten the ick. I really do feel like that. It's, the whole space is kind of, it feels a bit doomed at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of came in after the Manosphere was really a thing, and so, like, I'm familiar with some of the arguments, some of the players, but it's not something that I've kind of been closely tied. And honestly, I don't really hear much from it. Like, there are still guys. I don't know if you'd count, like, Kofi Annan or someone like that in that, who are posting and, doing intelligent stuff. So I know some of the guys still connected to that sphere are still, putting out work that's garnering, good attention and moving around Twitter and that kind of thing. But I don't really know that I have an awareness of that as, like, a larger movement at this point anymore. It's guys like Cernovich, I guess, would have been part of that, but, like, he's an entirely different thing at this point. His transformation has been something that was very different. You've got guys like Stefan Molyneux. I don't know if you would count them, but now he's kind of, he got the platform and exploded, and so I don't really know what that is as a coherent movement anymore. I mean, many of its concerns are still concerns of the online right, I think, but I don't know. I don't think of it as a distinct sphere as much as it used to be, but maybe I'm just not in touch with it as much as others.
Yeah, I think there are, kind of new players moved in, with, I think the Andrew Tate wave
Oh,
just
sure.
brought
Okay.
brought a lot of new faces to it. And yeah, I mean, I think I'm just probably because it's so, it's kind of reached its kind of apocalyptic exterminationist level, both on the kind of the male side, and kind of the rad fem side on the other end. And it's quite entertaining to watch, maybe betraying the fact that I've been reading too many of these tweets, in my little ghetto of Twitter. But yeah, it's kind of reached an interesting point. And I think it's a good case study. Obviously, it's probably the most interesting thing that's going on the internet, in the sense that it it relates to, problems that inevitably 99.9% of the people watching this will have, heartache, betrayal, divorce statistics, all this type of stuff. It's really engaging because, yeah, I mean, everyone's kind of interested in this. It's not just whatever Pareto said in like the 1890s or something like that. So
Oh, come on, there's a love residue in there. You can no,
I'm sure, yeah, exactly,
there is.
exactly. You can theory sell anything out of Pareto. Yeah, so I think that's probably mine. But yeah, no need to comment much more on that. And we can move to your project. I know you're writing a book. It is now serialized on your Substack. It is called The Total State. And if you had like kind of a maybe elevator pitch for the total state, maybe you could tell us kind of what the core idea is. I mean, what is a total state?
Sure. So, I mean, I think as a lot of us probably discovered as we kind of moved through the rabbit hole, politics doesn't work the way that we were taught. None of the government structures, our understanding of democracy, liberalism, these kind of things, they don't hold up under scrutiny. And when we observe kind of human behavior, but also the way our current regimes work, our Western liberal democracies work, they operate in a manner and hold power in a manner that is very different than anything outlined in a constitution or anything you'd get from like an American civics class or anything like that. And so the total state is kind of me working through different thinkers who have spoken about the different aspects of kind of liberal democracies and pulling apart like how this thing assembled, why it doesn't work in the way it's described to us, like why does this democracy work more like an oligarchy? Why does the Constitution not restrict the power of the government? Why are private institutions working hand in hand with government agencies in order to restrict things that we were told would be completely off limits to people in the marketplace? And kind of laying about kind of why that system all works together. I do have the rough draft chapters on the Substack, but it is also now set up with a publisher, so there'll be a full, complete physical copy here as well coming soon.
Excellent, excellent. I know we've chatted about this. I've also have a very like rough beginning of a book somewhere in the wings, and yeah, we've shared notes on this. But yeah, I think this is an extremely this is definitely the book you should be writing. It's reading some of the kind of the rough chapters. It's yeah, it's essentially the best presentation of you know core ideas from NRX, and also kind of bringing in a lot of the elite theorists, and it's kind of expanding the seed from Moldbug and into something that's much more not necessarily coherent, because I think he's relatively coherent, though I know not everyone agrees, but also it's accessible in the sense that you really take your time to move through it, and to you know you could tell that you're someone who's worked in a narrative field. You know how to, to lay out an idea so that by the end of the chapter, by the end of the page, you get it. You really do get it. And you don't need like 7,000 priors. You don't need to have read all the 17 books that Moldbug references in every page of Unqualified Reservations. So I think this is a public service, I think, beside the fact that I'm sure it's going to do really well as a book.
No, thanks. Yeah, Curtis often speaks in parables, which is fun, but but can be challenging for many. And there's also, I think, while obviously his reading list was very influential on me, his thought was very influential. There's also a lot that he didn't really include in some of his work. Sam Francis did an amazing amount of work explaining the modern state in Leviathan and its enemies, and it's like a 700-page book that never got a proper editing thing, so like no one read it. And so it's just amazing how much of this again is already known, was already laid out. There are already theorists, there are already people who have analyzed and understood many different pieces of this. And so it's great to have an opportunity to basically just kind of weave these thinkers together in a way that kind of makes sense, because they all, none of these ideas are necessarily new to me, but they're all things that I think are found in, 3 chapters of one book and 5 chapters of another book and 2 chapters of one book. And unless you committed yourself to 10,000 pages of reading, you might not, pull all those things together. And so I think there is a good opportunity to kind of bring that into all one place and lay it out in order. And so that's what I'm hoping to do.
Yeah, you're one of the few people who's actually read more than the Wikipedia entry and the SPLC mention for a lot of this stuff. So that's definitely a competitive advantage, because I see you people. I know that you don't do the reading. There's quite a lot of theory cells without the theory, because there's so much digested. But yeah, I think you're doing the work there.
That would be interesting, like turning SPLC entries into a reading list. Like, well, if it shows
Who
up here, then
doesn't?
I should probably. Who
That's
doesn't?
where I source my guests.
Yeah, who doesn't get the recommended reading or guest lists off of? Yeah, no, we
Exactly.
really appreciate you guys collating all this for us. That's great. Yeah.
If I sometimes I really do like scroll, and if I don't know someone, I'm like, oh, that's a new face. He hasn't been on, but yeah, it's a good resource, and I do appreciate the kind people at the Southern Poverty Law Center putting
For
in
doing the
the
Sparks notes for the
exactly putting in the work, just to maybe setting up my notes for me exactly, because yeah, they definitely extract the spiciest stuff in those bios, so it's good. You also speak about patronage as well. I mean, is I think there's definitely a difference in how patronage works currently in the total state between the right and the left, and you are kind of a beneficiary in a way of patronage. You're now part of the blaze, which is you've kind of made it. You've got someone who's kind of has your back. A relatively it's not a mainstream publication. It's pretty much a more it's not it's also it's all these labels far right whatever. It's not like a center right publication. It's one that's trying to be a bit more dissident, and obviously that's why they're interested in work like yours. But yeah, this is an established company. It's got funders. It's got it's set up to represent. So kind of what has this move taught you about patronage?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the good old boys and their patronage education here. But yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, I've the Blaze just turned me loose. They said, "Here you go, make what you want, write what you want, have on who you want." I've never had anything other than than the green light and okays for them for all this stuff, and so that's been really amazing. And that means I've gotten to write articles saying conservatism is dead and we got to do something else, the mainstream conservative audiences, and got to talk about patronage and talk about just kind of everything that I think we've many of us have explored here, and that's been an amazing opportunity. I was trying to get all of my work and write a book and everything done in between having a real life job and family and everything, and just the fact that I can now make this my full time thing has just been it's obviously been life changing in a very real way, and so just being able to explore all these ideas and commit myself fully to this has been a huge thing. And you really see how you probably wouldn't need to do all that much to really enable this for a lot of people. A lot of a lot of the best work being done on the right now is being done by anons who are struggling to find a minute to write this stuff down or record it or produce it or edit it or whatever. And so it's just amazing, I think, the amount of creative energy that could be completely unleashed by a kind of a full, proper understanding of patronage from more right-leaning elites. And so, I've been an incredible beneficiary. Obviously, like very lucky and blessed. And I only hope that this is opens gates for more people. That more people are able to kind of step through this and have similar opportunities. I think there are like I think there are these new media companies are looking for something different, and I think they see a lot of opportunity and energy and new blood out there. And so I do hope that's just the beginning for I hope other people have that opportunity.
Yeah, I'll take this as my cue to advertise my availability as a patronee. Any uh, billionaires, even multimillionaires who might be listening to this show, or media conglomerates. I'm my email is on my website, and please do contact me in case you have any sort of money that you'd like to throw in my direction. Um, anyway, but yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I mean, I don't know. I know there's kind of a lot of kind of cloak and dagger stuff going around about Peter Thiel funding a lot of podcasts. And I think, I've been talking to some of these podcast people, and I don't think Peter Thiel funds that many. I know he doesn't fund mine. I know, I've denied this many times. I wish he did, but he doesn't. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more space for this type. But I do think like the anonymous rich funder is a type, and I think I have heard like it wasn't there like at the American Conservative the Rod Dreher columns I think were funded by one guy who really loved Rod Dreher for a very long time, and I think yeah, I think this is it has been a model in this space. You kind of need an eccentric person to risk putting their money to, yeah, maybe a bit more controversial people. So I hope the trend catches on, and more yeah, more people of means um get a liking of this space. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of, overblown a little bit, but also yes, I think this is a mechanism by which a lot of these guys get funded. But yeah, most of your anons are just people with a job. Yeah, having talked to many of them, yeah, they just do their day jobs. Sometimes their day jobs are easy. That's why they tweet so much. But yeah, they still have a day job.
Yeah, I think it's something that has to become more normal. I mean, you look at the left and they just blow through billions of dollars funding stuff that is never going to turn them a profit and is never going to immediately like become the next big thing. But they understand the long game. Like they know that patronage, they know that buying of influence in the short term, even if they can't put 1,000 NASCAR patches on it or whatever for sponsorship, even if it doesn't immediately, show up on the balance sheet, long term, they win the game because they have the cultural influence, they have the media power, they have the ability to kind of shift, public opinion with all of this. And the right really has to start getting into that mentality. Everything can't just be a check for like, how much money it can make you, or how quickly it wins an election or something. You got to play the long game. You got to understand that funding, the left funds all kinds of crazy radical theories. We're living under the domination of them right now. Like no one thought that any of this like queer theory or trans stuff would have been a dominant archetype, 30 or 40 years ago when the left was pumping money into it, and now it rules you. So like you really have to you understand that those investments in the long term pay off. And so I think that mentality just has to shift because, like you said, there are so many anons that are just doing really great work without any kind of compensation and without, just barely kind of, figuring out on the weekends. And some of them, go on to like, found organizations or create their own YouTube channels and have success. And that's great. Like that's awesome. But there has to be a way, for these people who don't immediately fall into marketability to still be able to kind of produce work because that really will pay dividends in the long run. And that's a mentality shift that just has to happen.
Yeah, I think you make a good point by, the idea that people, a lot of Republican or conservative donors shovel money to candidates who, even if they win, I mean, people kind of have a feeling about what we think on this side about elections and the validity of
Yeah.
elections, the possibility of actually making change even after an electoral victory. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a money pit. You have much, I promise 100% ROI if you if you make a significant contribution in the long run. Obviously, we're going to measure ROI in about 100 years when the new regime is actually completely established. But definitely can promise better ROI than whatever local candidate or maybe local candidate, that's a better investment, but national candidate, not a very good investment. So yeah, I think that's a difference that I think more people are starting to grasp. But I feel like we're trying to do God's work here and explain it in more detail to potential investors.
Yeah, it is wild to watch people still like kamikaze themselves into like this DeSantis Trump showdown. Like this is going to be the thing. I'm constantly told that we don't need to worry about like NRX or Curtis Yarvin. We've learned all the things we need to learn from that, and there's no reason to talk about it anymore. There's no time to spend any more time on it. And then people just like completely like turn themselves into Bill Mitchell when it comes to an election season, and it's like, so you learn nothing. You've grasped none of this. You still don't, still don't get any part of this. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, I think it's got to be something that people you have to adjust. Like you said, the local candidate is a much better investment. At least they have a chance of directly keeping some kind of trash out of your kid's school or whatever. And so it's wild that people still think like I like Ron DeSantis. Yeah, I live in Florida. I benefit from the rule of King DeSantis. And but I always say, I don't think he should have ran. I think Trump should be the candidate. Even though I think Ron DeSantis is probably more capable in governance, because I don't think capable of in governance is what matters here. Like I don't think electing the best administrator is going to be
No.
the thing that changes things here. And so it's just wild to me that people still buy into that.
Yeah, well, in the sense that people are in power there. I mean, that's the fact. He literally has, layers upon layers of his own people there. That's why the whole thing works.
Yes.
It's not like if you take him from there, it's like, almost like magic dirt, theory. It's like, plop one there, it's a thing, magic happens. No, you need the whole substructure to be aligned with you. And in Florida, it is in large part aligned with him. I mean, people really do look up to Ron DeSantis. They see the results. They are, ideologically aligned with him. Not everyone, obviously, but he has actual victories over the people who are not aligned with him. He's got patronage networks within the state. I mean, all of that stuff is not replicable at the national stage. You just can't. It does not scale. So, and that's kind of why, I like Ron DeSantis too. I think he's probably more capable than Donald Trump. But just given the constraints of the office and what exactly would happen if he became president, if he didn't act like a Caesar figure and literally gut the whole apparatus, and he doesn't have that. It's impossible. Plus, who would he? Would he have to take the whole administration of Florida and take it to the national stage? Just populate the whole government with his people. There's not enough people. Plus, I would feel very badly for the people in your state because you seem to be doing so well. So, yeah, it doesn't seem to me. And also, the Ron DeSantis versus Trump fights on Twitter. Please stop, people.
Oh yeah,
You know,
it's so
we're talking
horrible.
about the ick. It is beyond low status. Just who's fighting whom. I mean, some of you guys are my friends, but please step away from the keyboard. This is beneath you. So yeah, it's very lame. That's kind of what I wanted to say.
Yeah, it's I don't understand how people don't get that at this point. Like, here's where we are in the cycle. Politicians are weapons you aim at the cathedral. Like they're rocks that you throw at the windows. Like that's that and who's the best rock? Donald Trump. Let's just be honest. I don't think Donald Trump's going to be the best governor. I don't think he's going to have the best staff. I don't think he's going to have the best advisors. And I know that because I watched his last, presidency, though it's still much better than obviously, with Joe Biden or anything. But yeah, I mean, I understand he's not going to be very good at this stuff. But I don't think that, again, as capable as DeSantis is in his environment, I think your point is a really good one. Like he has what has given him the ability he's had right now is the way in which he's been able to build a power base outside of DC, outside of this system, and trying to pick that up and then just drop it into DC. It's insufficient. You need to spend another 10 years with 10 Ron DeSantises across the nation, building up the kind of counter elite that allows you to,
Yeah.
come in and completely gut, the federal bureaucracy. That's when you're ready to win this thing. You're just not there yet. And so, yeah, going on Twitter and just again Bill Mitchelling yourself in front of everybody is just I don't know why you would spend your time that way. It seems foolish.
Yeah, it's just I feel like a Rhonda Santas presidency would be a terrible waste of a good governor for Florida. That would
Yeah,
be it. It
precisely.
would just gut the governorship in Florida, and whoever comes next is probably going to be worse. And they probably will, try to enact revenge for all the slights against the cathedral. So, yeah, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. So, yeah, I think we're slowly coming up on time, but I want to ask you the question of the show again. And I know you're an avid reader, and I'm sure you can rummage to find a subversive thinker that you think people should check out or maybe be a bit more attentive to.
Yeah, I knew this question was coming, and I did not properly prepare yet again.
Don't
That's
worry.
so foolish.
I never
Um,
I never do.
so
Because
I've
people
been
ask me this too.
I've been working on a series on Alexander Dugin, and I've been working with Michael Millerman on that. People can watch us as we break down the fourth political theory. Uh, Dugin's interesting because he does not have a ton of new ideas per se, but he has a very good synthesis and puts together in a good order many of the critiques of kind of the Western liberal system, the democratic system. And so he has, I think, a good grasp on that and a good critique of that. If you're going to read Dugan, you obviously need to understand he is, an actor with a very specific political agenda. He is an actor who has a very specific political, geopolitical outcome. He does directly call for the destruction of America and the West, and so just go into him understanding that he has a very specific bias and objective. But I think if you do, the fourth political theory has some pretty interesting things and puts, again, you could get the ideas from other authors, but he does a good idea of synthesizing them. And I think he's worth reading, though it's becoming increasingly difficult because you can't buy many of his books. They've been removed from Amazon and such, so it could be a little more difficult than it used to be. But I think he's worth reading at this point.
Yeah, I think so, especially because this is probably the only contemporary attempt at any sort of kind of mm, maybe not anti-liberalism, but a kind of a counter um, position or synthesis of different viewpoints from different strains of political theory. And yeah, he's the only person in the arena trying to do this in a way that is actually politically salient. Like he is a face lord. He is, he has the ear of the one of the great statesmen of our time. Like he's really putting himself out there in tragic ways, unfortunately, as well. Obviously, independent of what you think of the person. I mean, he's had some terrible personal tragedies with his daughter dying in a car bomb. It just he's really got skin in the game. Like I said, independent of what you think of his book, and I think it's worth it. And also, yeah, in general, Michael Millerman's work as well. I think he's also one of the few people who present illiberal or anti-liberal thinking from ages ago, from the antiquity up to Alexander Dugin. So I think he's definitely worth checking out. He's got Millerman School as well, and also obviously all of your work, which I very warmly recommend to people. The Substack is called The Total State, where you'll find the serialized chapters of the book, and also, of course, the Auron MacIntyre show on the Blaze and various articles that are on the Blaze as well. And is there any other thing that you'd like people to check out?
I guess just the podcast, the everything that used to go on the YouTube channel still goes there, but it also is in audio form on the podcast, and that's on everything Apple, Spotify, and all that stuff. So if people want to, listen while they're mowing the lawn or vacuuming or organizing the books or whatever, hitting the gym, then you have that option as well.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that's usually how I listen to your episodes. But yeah, absolutely good. Well, thank you so much for coming on again, Auron. This has been a pleasure as always.
No, absolutely. Thank you.